Hey there everybody, and welcome back to more Silent Hill 2. So now we are pretty much done with the Brookhaven Hospital. It's time to continue on through the game. We obviously have to chase after Laura. If for those of you who didn't catch the last video or don't remember, we now have a map for some reason indicating that we need to get a wrench and then we need to get a key from the Rosewater Park. And in the middle of all that, we probably should find Laura, as there's plenty of dangerous monsters patrolling the darkened streets now. For the most part, though, I still have to point out the fact that probably 80% of the combat in the game you can easily evade, as you can see here. I really don't understand people's real complaints with the combat, since it's really secondary to everything else going on in the game. There's honestly just so much more to the game, and to some degree, I kind of see this as a low point in the game. I suppose there is some interesting stuff to see, but there's not really nightmarish architecture going on. It's still pretty much the same exact Silent Hill town setup as it was before. It's just now that they've replaced the fog with a lot of darkness and nurses, I guess. It really seems like the entire point of this is for James to stockpile plenty of items for the rest of the story. Mostly due to the fact that I would say probably about 60% of the total items in the game are now populating these darkened streets. It's more or less up to you as the player, though, to make sure that you explore thoroughly and cover everything. I mean, it's a pretty short distance to get where we need to go, which is on the other side of Silent Hill. But, you know, if you want to make sure that you're well stockpiled, it's probably best to look around. And in this darkened, grating covered floor, we're going to run into a new enemy. There we go. I think they are called Mandarin. I'm not exactly sure why, but they are not very threatening, to say the least. You only ever see them hanging on to these grated floors and just trying to show off their attack here a little bit. It really requires you to like purposely stand still and run over their hands, so it's more than likely you will never get hit by them. Especially, they seem to appear less than even the bugs, so you're honestly never going to have a problem with them, and you're never going to want to fight them. So I will say, though, they really do remind me of the starting enemy that you see in Silent Hill 3. I'm sorry I don't remember the name of that particular enemy offhand, but just their hands and their lanky bodies really remind me of that particular enemy. If anybody knows what it is, please feel free to tell me. But we are back. I think that area that we were just in was South Vale, or this entire area might be South Vale. We are, though, getting relatively near the apartments. I think this was the street that had the gentleman with all the tutorial pages. I will say, for those of you with a good eye, while I'm fast-forwarding through this exciting walking through the streets, you may notice that we are now picking up another new type of ammunition, the rifle shells. Hopefully you understand what that will be used for, but we'll save that for later when it comes up. It is interesting to go back into Bar Neely, though, as someone's decided to leave a very motivational message behind for James. This can be another factor in one of the endings. Basically, one of the endings depends a lot on if the fact that James is very, very depressed. And I'm going to leave it up to you out there to determine what that could possibly mean. I don't want to spoil the ending for anybody, especially since there are so many endings to get. But even if you've already collected items where you know there are items, it's a good opportunity to go back and double check, because sometimes new and better items are now populating those areas. Or sometimes the item placement is kind of relative or minorly changed. And sometimes, though, it just completely repopulates item placements that you've already gotten. I think all in all, after you have completely searched the streets, I think there's maybe like 8 to 10 boxes of handgun bullets. There's, I think, another 8 to 10 boxes of shotgun shells. There's about 4 boxes of rifle shells. Not to mention the, 8 health drinks and about 3 to 5 medkits. I even think there's actually like 1 or 2 ampules out here. Which, considering the fact that they're like the strongest healing item in the game, that's pretty amazing. But if you remember the map, we are actually where we need to be to pick up the wrench. And apparently there was also a letter here. Now, if you want to pause this at your own leisure, I tried to keep this up long enough for people to read it, but it seems that the director of the hospital who wrote the map in the first place really wasn't sure if James was going to go through with his, I guess, spirit quest. Obviously, he didn't know about James's wife, but it's easy to assume the fact that anybody in Silent Hill is searching for something that has an emotional connection, especially considering that the doctor seemed to be doing a very intense study regarding the other world and patients being affected by that. And apparently the doctor went in a bit too deep. We never do find out what happened to him, but you can assume that since we don't see him that he kind of died. But with that letter read, basically giving us a forewarning about continuing on with our journey and the possibility of what it may hold, we did also pick up a wrench, which we don't actually know the purpose of right now, but the next place marked on our map is the Rosewater Park. And if you remember the poorly written note that was present in the stairwell of the Brookhaven Hospital, you'll remember that one of the patients there apparently took, not stole, the director's key to the museum, and I guess that's what we're going to go get. Thankfully, with, well, we'll see in just a second. And for those of you who don't remember, there was a door near the apartments that we weren't able to get into before, and thankfully we don't have to retrace our steps to the apartment. Not that we could even get back into the apartments due to the fact that they are mysteriously locked, but the door that wakes in darkness, opening into nightmares, well, it's pretty fucking dark out, so I can only assume that this door is unlocked. That gives us a nice little shortcut, even though realistically we will never really have to be transversing these streets ever again, which is good because all in all, even though the architecture and setup of the streets is pleasant and very well thought out, this is in essence just backtracking. And considering the fact that most of this is done in double time, you can only assume, if you thoroughly explore and make sure to get all the items, how much this little side trip can actually take up time-wise. It is worth it though, especially if you find yourself not that adept at combat and you find yourself wasting a lot of bullets or just getting trounced upon by the enemies. But either way, it's a good opportunity to really become accustomed to how the streets are set up and the best ways to get around. Paul's Pizza? Or Andy's Pizza? Paul's Pizza is non-existent. I think they're... Actually, remembering, I noticed the fact that Eddie in the bowling alley was eating All-Star Pizza, and there's Andy's Pizza. I think there was also another pizzeria advertised in one of the apartments. So, Silent Hill is apparently like a pizzatopia. But here's that statue, and looks like there's something in the ground here. Oh, it's dig it up. Looks like there is a metal box. Well, thankfully, for those of you who are playing, you made sure not to go to the Rosewater Park first, because it would be a complete waste of time. As to how the patient somehow managed to fasten down the box with bolts, or whether or not it was the doctor that did it, I think it was the doctor. And that's why he left the bolt, or the wrench for you. But hopefully you made sure to do that all in order, otherwise you're going to do a lot of unnecessary backtracking. But with that, we now have the key to the Silent Hill the Old Silent Hill Historical Society, which I think is the full name of the building, which is also marked off on our map. And that's actually going to be taking us into a relatively new area that we didn't manage to cover. It's actually further down the road past the bowling alley, along Nathan Avenue, for those that remember the trick-or-treat quiz. And there's really not too much other stuff new, but I did want to slow it down here a bit, just since it's kind of a relatively new area, and I actually do find the signs relatively interesting because they show some measure of thought. Well, some of them do. Obviously, people aren't really wanting to advertise that much in Silent Hill anymore. Not since the permanent eclipse. Also, I'm sure somebody out there, European, might know better than me, but is rod a metric measurement? I know there's like hogshead and a stone, but I've never heard of a rod as a unit of measurement. And as to why that's why it's on an American billboard, I really don't know. But a lot of these signs will seem familiar for particular businesses, like Jack's Inn. And this is actually the Historical Society itself, but there is something interesting to investigate further on down the street, outside of all the wonderful, wonderful billboards. Let's see, what does this one say? That's not a good angle to look at. Let's see. We got veterinarian vaccine clinics and T's Italian Restaurant. T's Italian Restaurant actually does exist in the game. I do not think Giga Computers actually exists anywhere as a store in Silent Hill, which is a bit of a bummer. And I hope you all appreciate my stealthful evading. Heaven's Night. It's kind of weird looking billboard. It seemed like there was one set of letters that is like neon letters superimposed over rather bland looking letters. But for those of you assuming, why don't we just take Nathan straight down to Lakeview? Well, yeah, Nathan just kind of drops off into oblivion. The game can't be that easy, right? And if you manage to somehow just decide to run straight down to Lakeview earlier on in the game, before we actually went to the bowling alley, you'd run across this dead gentleman who had a map nice enough to point out to us, oh, you need to go to the bowling alley for reasons unknown. But another good reason to check down here is also because it has rifle shells, which are going to be amazing later on for very particular instances. But let's go ahead and head back down to the Historical Society. Also, I will say that depending on what type of ranking you are wanting to get, this area can also be fairly easy to get the necessary kills you want, because kills do factor into the overall, ranking. And nurses are a lot easier to take down, in my opinion, than the lying figure. But let's leave this nice lady behind. And let's get a base view of the interior for the Historical Society. But we'll see you next time for more Silent Hill 2.